So thanks so much for joining. Really appreciate it. So my name is Sahil, Jain. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called AdStage. And what I'm here to tell you a little bit more about and talk about is something that's pretty near and dear to us and we're really excited about. It's this new kind of topic that we've been talking about called the convergence. And basically, that's a very dramatic way of saying there's a lot of alignment happening with marketing and sales, with marketing data, sales data. But in general, one way of seeing this and one use case that I'm going to talk to you guys about today is how to actually marry your social advertising efforts with your marketing automation efforts. And since it's a HubSpot conference, it's more so that you guys are doing a lot of marketing automation, and how can you actually tie social advertising into the mix to start to amplify your different efforts that you may have going on. So very quickly about AdStage, just to kind of qualify why I'm here. So we build a cross-network ad management solution where you can kind of manage and report and automate your campaigns across Google, Bing, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. So understanding the social and search advertising world is something that we've been doing for many years now. And what's fascinating is how it's all starting to come together alongside email campaigns, right, which a lot of us are probably very used to. So just to kind of start things off and to dive in, standard agenda. So we're going to start by talking about a few different tactics. So my goal is that you can walk away from this presentation later this week or next week after you guys have kind of cooled down from the actual conference and you use these tactics in practice. And so we'll start by something really, really tactical, which is pulling your strategic company list and how to actually use that for top of funnel content, so on and so forth, and then tie in the advertising side. How to actually use social ads and what tools you can use. There's a few new tools that these networks have created that are fairly interesting. Then we're going to kind of move forward with dynamic retargeting, which is another opportunity to actually, instead of having to use existing leads, you can start using dynamic retargeting, which I'll kind of tell you guys all about if you're not familiar. And then finally, we're going to tie it all together. So let's start with a diagram that most of us are probably fairly familiar with. This is kind of what marketing automation in a very simplified version looks like. The idea, was novel, but the idea now should be a little bit more routine. And it's basically, being able to bring users into a funnel, right? So these are random strangers or visitors. Let's say that you have a blog. They sign up for your blog. They read your content. Maybe they sign up for your blog and subscribe. Then they can become an actual lead in your given pipeline. Maybe the sales team gets that lead. And then so on and so forth. As they move through the decision-making funnel or the decision-making process, you have different touch points. And that's kind of the beauty of marketing automation is, using things like email. You can send them a variety of different drip campaigns, and you can get them to actually convert, or the idea is acceleration through the pipeline, right? Acceleration through the actual decision-making process. And that's essentially what this diagram shows you. But there's one really big issue with this, and this is where the idea is, it's not just a marketing team working siloed in a separate marketing department. It's not just the sales team working on their own. Just like marketing automation can help, kind of accelerate people through the decision-making process or the content process, you can also accelerate a lot of your leads through the sales lead cycle, right? So from a stranger or a cold lead to contract in hand through proposal, and then ideally close one in loss. But the big issue that we find with this diagram today is that it's predominantly email, right? And a lot of us who understand email know that if you're really, really lucky, maybe you'll have a 40 to 50% open rate. And if you're even more lucky, you'll have a 5 to 10% click-through rate, which is okay, but you're missing a lot of your decision makers. You're missing a lot of different folks that should actually consume the content you may be sending out, or hopefully you're trying to capture. And so the problem with email is inherent, but you also have to start to realize, and we all know this now, especially the vast majority of us in this audience know this, is that your key decision makers, especially in a B2B lens, but even on the B2C side, are spending time everywhere, right? So if you take a quick look at a variety of the big numbers that we're going to throw up here, we know that the world is connected. Beyond that, we know that a lot of different users are starting to use things like mobile. You have the overlap of mobile and social media. These are large sections of our population that are starting to be online, but they're not just in their email inbox, right? They're using their various apps, their native applications, they're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. So you can see here, on average, a user is spending about 41 minutes a day on Facebook. 21 minutes a day or so on things like Instagram. They're not just living in their inbox. And this is B2B data, right? So B2B users in general are starting to expand their time outside of the inbox. So as marketers, how can we figure out ways to get in front of them when they're not in their inbox, when they're not checking their email? How can we get our message, our content, our brand in front of them? And so today, hopefully, we can walk through a few different tactics that we can use to do exactly that. So before we dive in, a couple interesting facts. Only 2% of cold calls typically lead to a booked appointment. A 2% conversion rate to actually getting the lead inside of your existing system is decent. But we can do a lot better than that, certainly with paid marketing, but in general with marketing automation, all sorts of new tactics are allowing us to increase this number for the sales team, bring in more marketing qualified leads, sales qualified leads, so on and so forth. My favorite stat, which is really interesting here, is for companies with about 150 to 500 employees or more, you typically have about 6 to 7 different decision makers in the buying process, right? So at AdStage, we're selling to B2B customers as an example. And so for us, with email open rates of 40 or 50%, click-through rates of maybe 5 to 10%, that's if we're performing really, really well, you're lucky if you even get in front of one of those decision makers, right? And that's with your traditional email channels. So how can we change this? How can we add additional touch points beyond just email? And today, hopefully, we can walk through that. So the very first thing, the very first tactic we're going to talk about here is acquiring your strategic company list. So there's 2 different types of lists that we're going to try to show you how to pull, right? And then how we're going to actually use this. So the first one here is a sales top prospect list. So everyone here who works with or has a sales team understands that they have a top prospect list. It's a list of leads they're really excited to acquire. They're not currently in the database. Maybe they are a land and expand opportunity. But these are the businesses or companies or customers that you're really looking to buy or really looking to have buy your software or whatever offering or service you may have. The second here is the website visitor company list. So this is a list of people who don't show any intent, really. They simply come to your site, and then they leave, right? But you wish there was a way to actually capture those companies and try to do things like account-based marketing or start to target them at large. And so these are the 2 different company lists, and we're going to show you how to actually use them. So the very first one is a sales top prospect list. So within any sort of CRM or any sort of marketing automation tool, like a lot of you guys here, I'm sure, are using things like HubSpot, you can create things called custom views. So at AdStage, we have a variety of different custom views, right? We're a business ourselves. We're selling to B2B, other businesses. And so one of our custom views is qualified leads, marketing qualified leads. We have certain different aspects that we look at. But the idea is we have a list set of users and really companies that they're tied to that we deem being the top prospect list. And all you do is you go into any of the tools that you're using and you pull that list of companies. Really, really simple. It sounds almost too simple, right? On Salesforce, the same thing here, right? So these are just different examples. So if you guys are using Salesforce, of course you have a top prospect list in there. It depends on which different field you're actually pulling from. You're going to pull the list of companies. We use a variety of tools at AdStage, just to give you an example. So, and I'm sure, again, at your companies you do this as well. Here's an example of another company or another tool called Intercom, where, again, we have this exact same sort of custom view pulled together. And depending on the system that you're in, if you're in Salesforce, it's going to be a little bit more of a sales queue on how you actually qualify that list. In Intercom, it's based on user engagement. So it depends on the types of engagement those users are taking. But these are the different lists we're going to pull. Here's another quick example. The idea is really simple, right? I'm going to pull the list of companies that have come to our site. They've maybe given us their name. They maybe signed up for one of our blog posts or pieces of content, but they actually haven't engaged their sales team. They're still really cold leads. Another tool that you can actually use, which I think is really interesting, and this is actually directly from HubSpot, is using reverse IP lookup. So let's say that you have a user that comes to your site. They're from a company you really want to acquire, but they never sign up for anything. So you actually just lose them typically, right? You've lost that lead. You've lost that opportunity. Well, with reverse IP lookup, what actually happens is some tools will actually look through the domain and actually find the company that they're from. So in this case, you can see a variety of companies that have come to our site in the last 24 hours or so. And you can see that what we can do is pull that list of companies who've engaged at our site, who've come to our site, but haven't necessarily signed up or linked. You'd think at this moment, though, with typical email campaigns, for example, you don't have their email address, so you'd be at a loss, right? But there are ways that we can use that exact company list and try to re-engage that given user that came to our site. So before we actually take those companies that we've now pulled from the variety of different data sources, or data warehouses is what you can call it, a couple things to keep in mind. The first thing that we're going to start with is these are new prospects. These are people who haven't signed up yet. How can I start to nurture them and get them into the actual lead flow? And this is something, a very simple funnel that we created at AdStage is how we start. We start with what we call low friction content or top of funnel content. So very basic stuff like blog posts and infographics, things that aren't self-perpetuating. This is the biggest mistake that the majority of marketers seem to make today, which is they start immediately with branded content or they're trying to sell something without actually building any trust in the user. The first rule that we have, at least at our company, is no self-perpetuating content, certainly at top of funnel. So we'll start with things like blog posts or infographics. We're trying to have some sort of value exchange, right? Try to teach the given user, the end user, something. Then we'll move further down the funnel to what we call higher friction content. So you have guides, you have white papers, maybe you have a branded case study. And as you go further and further down the funnel, that's when it's okay to start to introduce things that are a little bit more focused on your business or a little bit more conversion oriented. So what we recommend is to start with your top of funnel content, especially from a B2B SKU, or if you're a lead gen advertiser. It actually doesn't matter if you're necessarily B2B or B2C, the focus here being lead generation or lead generation type of company that you're trying to focus on. And so what we would do is we'd actually start with LinkedIn as our top of funnel lead gen place. And you can start in a variety of places. You can start on Facebook, you can start on Twitter. The idea is this is where you're going to start with your organic posting. But organic, as we all know, doesn't really get you there. So what about all those companies that have come to our site they signed up, or they engaged with our site in some way. How can we target those specific users? This is why we use LinkedIn. So the example here is that with LinkedIn, all these different ad networks, or these different social networks I showed you previously, Snapchat, Instagram, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, every single one of them has some sort of ad product. Some sort of product where you can do something like this. You can have advanced targeting to actually target specific users on their network. Now, all the ad products aren't necessarily the most advanced, Facebook being kind of the main one that everyone is kind of going to from Google. But LinkedIn's really interesting because it's very B2B focused. So in this case, I can target by job title, I can target by skill or job function, but I can also target by company name. So with that company list that I took from the variety of different databases that I take a look at, whether it's Salesforce, Intercom, HubSpot, I can actually target those exact companies. So in this example, I'm targeting HubSpot. I'm targeting search marketing managers, content marketing managers, anyone who's could potentially be a relevant customer for us. I'm also going to use their and-based targeting. So this is really specific. So remember, with different networks, they either have or-based targeting or and-based targeting. In LinkedIn's case, it's and-based. So the more targeting that you add, the different fields that you use, the smaller your actual reach is going to become, but the more specific it's going to become. So in this case, I'm also going to target online marketing managers. I'm going to target different industries that are relevant to us, so marketing and sales. And then I'm going to shoot off my actual pieces of content, right? So the first thing you want to do is pull this strategic company list. You're going to use that as targeting for this top of funnel. And the reason why it's top of funnel, it's important that you don't go straight to the conversion pieces. They don't really know much about you yet, right? All they know is that they've seen your site, maybe they've read a piece of content, but that's it. So now that you're starting to show these users your top of funnel content, what's next, right? And so we're going to move into actually influencing these users once they become a lead in your system. So a lot of us here probably have a very standard sales funnel setup. Open, qualified, proposal in hand, maybe contract in hand, closed, and won or lost, right? One thing that's really fascinating, one of the coolest things that these social ad networks have done is they've given you the ability, and I'm going to show you and walk you through this, to actually nurture not just kind of pre-lead contacts, but nurture contacts once they're actually in your lead lifecycle. So once they're in your sales pipeline, throughout every single stage of the sales pipeline, you can nurture them with different messaging, you can send them case studies, so on and so forth. So if we take a look at all of our different CRM tools, again, some of you may be using HubSpot as your kind of core CRM. What we're going to do now is pull a list of actual users. So these are people who saw our top of funnel content in our little hypothetical situation we have going on, right? We've shown a lot of content, top of funnel on LinkedIn or on Facebook. We've now started capturing some of those users. We're driving them to non-self-perpetuating content. And some of these users have signed up for our content, right? So they've given us their actual email address. So this is typically where the majority of us would start to rely on email marketing, right? We'd start to pepper these users with a variety of different messages, try to get them into our system. But remember, email is not a perfect world. In fact, many times we're going to miss out on the opportunity because we just email open rates, right? People aren't always in their inbox. So in this case, what we did at AdStage, just to give you an example, we have a segment called disengaged users, right? We also have a variety of other segments that are more positive, but let's go with the negative one here just because we're going to try to help ourselves out as a company. So we're going to take this list of disengaged users. These aren't people who have necessarily signed up for AdStage. And we're going to try to actually show them messaging beyond just the inbox. So it's really cool, and this is probably my favorite thing that these social ad networks have created. So there's two products, really the same product across the different networks. So on Facebook, it's called Custom Audiences. Twitter, same product called Tailored Audiences. And recently, Google AdWords just launched their version of it called Customer Match. And it's a very, very, very simple concept. You can take any set of email addresses, phone numbers, Facebook IDs, Twitter user IDs, so on and so forth, and you can upload them into the systems. So if I have 1,000 email addresses that I want to target, I can simply take those email addresses, upload them into Facebook, upload them into Twitter, and say, I just want to target those exact users, right? Or, and this is a little bit more advanced, we won't talk about this today, but I want to target users really similar to these users, which is called lookalike targeting. So now that I took that list of, I think, 40,000 or so odd disengaged customers, disengaged users, I'm going to upload them into Facebook, and I'm going to upload them into Twitter. Just a couple of quick notes here. It can get very, very tedious, so there's a variety of tools out there that can help you kind of manage this, because if you're doing this properly, you're going to be changing these lists pretty often, you're going to be updating them, and it gets pretty cumbersome after a while. So this is what your new sales pipeline should look like. As soon as you upload those email addresses to Facebook and Twitter, what you're essentially doing is you're starting to show ads to those given users, right? So if you're a salesperson, what your goal is to accelerate leads through the pipeline. And as marketers, what can we do to help salespeople accelerate those leads through the pipeline? Something that we can do in this case is not just show top of funnel content, not just pepper them with emails, which your salespeople are probably already doing. What we can do is use social advertising at every stage of the given funnel. So this is just a very simplified funnel, I'll give you an example. And show them relevant messaging. So let's say that they're at qualified, right? The sales team actually qualifies this user. Well, they might want a little bit of help by showing them white papers or guides or case studies. And when they're outside their inbox, you can do this as a marketer by targeting those users that are in the qualified bucket and run ads about case studies, white papers, so on and so forth that you have in your company today. Make sense? So now that we've actually started to send these users additional content via social advertising at the different stages of the funnel, the next piece here is how can we actually retarget these given users? So you kind of think to yourself, well, custom audiences and tailored audiences are basically retargeting. But there's a pretty big flaw. The requirement is you need their email addresses or their phone numbers, so on and so forth. The other issue with it, too, is if you guys are B2B companies here in the audience, none of us really sign up to Facebook or these social networks really with our B2B email address, if you think about it. Or at least you certainly haven't updated it from your first job. So what happens is when you actually upload a B2B email address into Facebook, you're not going to match. It's called a match, right? So typically for B2B companies, your match rate is fairly low. And that's a big problem, right? So if you have a match rate of like 20 to 30%, it's not going to be as effective. You're still going to miss those given users. So there has to be another solution. So that's where dynamic retargeting comes into play. So very quickly, let's revisit our given funnel. So this is that given content funnel that I mentioned previously, right? So we start people off by showing them blogs and infographics. We move them further down the funnel by showing them more kind of higher friction content, like guides, white papers. Then if we're really, really lucky, we can show them a branded case study. And if they're still interested in our brand, we'll take them to a webinar. Right? That's the sort of funnel that we have set up here today. How can we force a user, it sounds aggressive, but that's essentially what we want to do as marketers, force a user from blogs, the blog posts, the infographics, further down the funnel? And you can use dynamic retargeting to do exactly that, right? So the idea here before we jump in is just to give you an example. So at AdStage, again, we write a lot of content. We're trying to kind of eat our own dog food, as they say. We do blog posts, we do webinars, white papers, all sorts of stuff. We've written about 320 pieces of content. So a lot of you probably are just starting to write your content, or you've kind of gotten a hang of it, and you're starting to produce a lot of content at a reasonable cadence. You can use all this content in these social advertising. The ad is not just a small text ad on Google anymore, right? The new advertising in general are content-based ad types. And so you have a lot of existing content. Your creative is already made. So you don't have to go through the process of messaging design, trying to get creative made again. Not necessarily. There's going to be a little bit of tweaks here and there. But the idea is you want to leverage your content to nurture these users and get them interested. And you'll notice that a lot of the information that we have up here, these examples of content that we have, they're not self-perpetuating content. They're not about AdStage. They're about how to teach you how to become better at LinkedIn, how to teach you what the actual efficiency of using tools or power tools is. Again, a lot of people make the mistake of getting really excited about the brand. We're all really excited about our own brands, right? We're excited about our companies, and that's great. But your users aren't excited about your company yet, right? And in order for them, the best way to get them to use your product is to get them to trust your brand. If they trust your brand, they trust your product, they're more likely to actually sign up. So your goal, this is kind of that initial dance phase where you're really trying to learn the partner, you're trying to figure out how they move, and you're trying to get them enticed to actually take an interest in your brand, right? So this is what the ideal funnel should look like. At every stage of this given content funnel, we're going to start showing them the next stage. So if I go for blogs and infographics, every time I get a user that signs up for a blog or an infographic, my goal is to now show them white papers. After white papers, my goal is to show them a case study, so on and so forth. So how can we kind of create this force function to get them to do this? And this is where social advertising and dynamic retargeting comes into play. So it's really, really simple. So retargeting, for those of you who don't know, you drop a piece of code on your site, right? This code, kind of like tracking a shark, this code will basically tag users as they come to your site and track them when they go around the web. It's called a cookie. And as they go across the web, if they go to Facebook, for example, if you're using a Facebook pixel, Facebook knows that this user had been to your site and now they're on Facebook, and so you can show them an advertisement. You can show them content, right? So really, really simple how retargeting works. It essentially gives you those additional touch points if you don't capture the user on that first time. And realistically speaking, for the vast majority of us as B2B businesses, we understand that we're not going to get the user on that first click. We're certainly not going to get the user on the first visit. It's going to take some time, and it's going to take some nurturing, right? So now that I've actually dropped these different pixels across my site, I'm tracking the users that are coming to my site or coming to my blog. You can drop these on anything, right? We actually drop our pixels on our blog specifically, or really on the head of our site so we get through every single page. And we say anytime a user, you can set rules. So you can say anytime a user comes to adstage.io and goes to our blog, capture those users. Why? Because they're interested in content, right? Anytime a user goes to adstage.io /pricing, we're going to capture those users and bucket them into a pricing. So they're interested in pricing. Price is something that they're interested in. Maybe they're sensitive to it. So we'll nurture them in a different way. Right? So ideally here, the one thing to keep in mind is, this is again, this is kind of another one of those just tips and tricks, is the biggest piece people typically miss is exclusions. So let's assume that you have this pixel on your site. You don't really want to capture every single user that comes to your site. Why? One quick example is you don't want to capture existing customers, unless you're an e-commerce business where you have repeat purchases. So we already have X number of customers at AdStage. We don't want to waste any of our advertising dollars or show them content that they've already seen. So one thing you want to do is add exclusions, right? You want to exclude your existing customer set. That's one example. Or what you can do is if we have that funnel, we can actually exclude people from different stages of the funnel. So this diagram is not the prettiest. It's a little bit difficult to follow, but try to get an idea of it. The idea here is I get a user to come to our site, and they sign up for our blog, or they see an infographic, and they come and sign up for our content, right? At that segment, I don't want to show people who already signed up for our blog any more blog content, right? I want to start showing them white papers. So what I'll do is I'll actually exclude blog users from that given segment to make sure that I'm not wasting any cash or capital or time on that given segment, essentially creating a forcing function, right? So now when a user signs up for a guide or white paper, the next thing I want to do is actually get them to see a case study. So I don't want them to see any more white papers or guides. So slowly, as I add these different exclusions at every stage of the funnel, I'm essentially forcing those users down the funnel to get closer and closer to my higher friction content, or what you can call your branded content, a variety of different names, but more specifically getting them to actually sign up for AdStage and become a customer. Make sense? So we're going to walk through just a couple quick examples. I'm sure a lot of you guys are familiar. If you guys are shopping, if you guys are going to a variety of different sites, Facebook retargeting is no secret. I think a lot of you, some people call it scary, some people call it kind of interesting. It creates this buyer guide for you. But here are a couple of examples of how this actually happens. So Hired is a job recruiting site. So if you guys are looking for jobs, you guys go to Hired. There's kind of this interesting auction that happens. But again, they're going to retarget me because you may not be looking for a job today. You may be looking for a job in a few months. But in general, you're probably not going to find a job in a day, right? So they're going to retarget me, be top of mind as a platform that I should be using. If I'm shopping, if I'm on American Apparel or Nordstrom's or whatever, they're going to try to hit me up multiple times because, again, in a buying cycle, you don't necessarily buy things at the beginning. Another thing you can do is you can say, hey, capture any user who abandons my shopping cart, right, or their shopping cart. So you can add whatever sort of rules you want to the retargeting parameters so that you're kind of effectively interjecting yourself when it makes sense. It's not too intrusive, but it's also relevant to the given stage of the user's buying cycle. A couple more examples. So Facebook has their mobile feed. So as you guys saw, the big mobile numbers. Certainly, it's really important for you guys to continue retargeting multi-device. So another thing is you might have a user who starts your process, whatever process you might be, if you're B2C, if you're B2B, on the desktop. And then they're going to move over to the mobile phone. Well, luckily for us, our friends at Facebook thought about that. And so you can actually kind of continue nurturing them from desktop to mobile. It's a multi-device world, multi-touch world. And so all those things are sort of handled in these given examples, right? So further examples here, I mean, a lot of you guys are probably familiar with, with the Instagram ads that have come out recently. In the last year, they got really, really popular. And so with Instagram ads, you have the same idea. So not only is it multi-touch, multi-device, but it's also a multi-platform world, or what we call an omni-channel world. There's a lot of different words for it. So your message should resonate across networks. It shouldn't just certainly be on Facebook or LinkedIn. You need to expand it. And then here are a couple examples that I really liked, particularly because they have to do with education, right? And so in this case, CyberU is basically selling me as a product person, a product management class. You also have an example of Cabbage trying to upsell one of their existing apps. And then here you have kind of what I want to take us back to is that top funnel piece of content. So Radius in this case is trying to sell me a playbook, right? It's not really selling me anything. In fact, it's just giving me value. Immediate value exchange that's created at the top of funnel will help you nurture these leads further and further down the funnel. And also, I'm probably a little bit more inclined to trust Radius because they gave me some free value, so I'll probably check out their product. I mean, I simplified it, but ideally, that's kind of how you think about it. All right, so let's bring all this together. It's pretty simple. It's not super complicated. So the idea here that we really want to focus on, and this is kind of the diagram that you want to look at, is a user comes to our site, come to AdStage in the bottom left corner. So we know that they came to our site. Now, it doesn't matter if they actually signed up with their email address, because we have a couple tactics, even if they didn't, with dynamic retargeting. But if they did, you can go straight and kind of skip through and actually start targeting via email address. But let's say they didn't. So what they're going to go see then is anytime they go to LinkedIn, we have their company name, so we're probably going to target them. Or we have dynamic retargeting set up. So we're going to start to show them that top of funnel content, that low friction content. And that's what you see at the top. But look what happens at the end of this given funnel. The idea is historically, as email marketers or from the marketing automation standpoint, you would just get that email portion. You'd be in their inbox, right? And probably in their inbox a few different times. But with this new tactic, the idea is not only am I in their inbox, but I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, and I'm actually syndicating that same piece of content. So the message is the same, but there are multiple places. It's really just getting a few extra chances, right? And hey, why not? If we can get a few extra chances with a low amount of spend and get in front of the user, we should certainly take advantage of that. And that's essentially this new picture that we've painted by going from just having email as the main source to expanding across the different ad channels. So now, if we revisit this diagram we had from the beginning, this beautiful diagram that HubSpot created for us, kind of explaining the power of marketing automation, you'll see how we've actually interjected top-of-funnel content, social advertising, low-friction content, so on and so forth, throughout the different stages. And remember, the goal, of course, the thing that I like the most about this given diagram is the promoter piece, right? So if you're really lucky, if you build a lot of trust, if you get the users to love your brand, get to love your content, they learn a lot from you, the goal is once they become a customer, you don't stop there. You continue to show them content. You continue to actually get them to kind of invest or be a part of your given business. And if you're really lucky, they become a promoter or evangelist for your business. And this is essentially what we're painting with this new world of kind of marketing and sales alignment, where you can use sales data. The marketing team can work with the sales teams. And you're starting to see this in more sophisticated companies in general, where these teams aren't working in silos. Historically, a lot of us marketers probably know, if you start in the paid world especially, we're kind of sitting in a corner in the company, building our ad campaigns, no one really cared about us, right? What's interesting now, and what we believe, is that over the next few years, next 5 to 10 years, you have this really interesting resurgence of the marketer, right? The marketer is becoming incredibly tool-oriented. The marketer is becoming a lot more savvy from a perspective of it's not just about big brand, but being able to actually measure brand, being able to measure your given effectiveness from lead generation. And essentially what you're starting to see, at least this is what we're seeing, during the Q&A section, I'd love to hear your thoughts too, but the idea is you're getting this new rise of what we call the head of demand generation, right? It's marketing operations is rising, demand generation is rising, and what this person is basically doing is orchestrating across not just advertising, not just digital in general, but pulling all the data from these different teams, from the sales team, from the content marketing team. So if the new ad type is content focused, the folks who are creating the content should probably help the ad team, right? They should probably pass over the best performing articles to the ad team so they can promote it further. So essentially this new kind of head of demand generation is what we call it. It's basically kind of the new lead in the marketing organization. Probably reports directly to the CMO, depends on the stage or size of the company. They're orchestrating across all these different business units within the business organization. And they can leverage the data from the sales automation team, the marketing automation team, the content team, to effectively create sophisticated efforts like you see up here, where essentially you took a traditional kind of marketing automation, email-focused play, and you interjected things like social advertising, right? To essentially influence, and at the goal, what you should see as a result here is acceleration through the pipeline. And hopefully customers that just simply like you more. So, key takeaways. You want to export that strategic company list. It's very easy. Any of you guys can do this probably right now. I'm sure you guys are, some of you guys have done this previously. Once you have that company list, remember, you don't have to have emails, just the company names, and know who you want to target, whether it's a, advertising manager, online marketing manager, so on and so forth. Then you're going to reach your pre-qualified leads using social advertising, so all the different tactics that we kind of spoke about today. You're going to promote top-of-funnel content, and I hope that every single one of you here, I stress to you that you don't want to promote that self-perpetuating content, but top-of-funnel content that really helps. Guides, white papers, so on and so forth. When you go to LinkedIn, what type of content do you want to see, as an example? Something that makes you better at your job, right? Well, all of us work in really interesting companies, really interesting industries. We can certainly teach someone something interesting, even if they're not in our industry, right? And then beyond that, we want to amplify to your existing, amplify your existing content, so on and so forth, to the different folks in the lead lifecycle and the decision-making funnel, and hopefully capture at a higher rate, accelerate those leads to the pipeline, and at the end of the day, have more time to close more leads. And that's it. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.